it is with regard to your professional amateur open. From what I've gathered, you are planning to have an event on the weekend which is going to be an informal event which is going to last for 3 hours. I do not see what is the marginal benefit that is happening because of this event as opposed to other events which are already being conducted in the institute like Freshiza, flagship events and so forth. What is the marginal benefit that you're getting out of this event? Because as I see in other guys' manifestos, they're already holding these open events which are informal on other weekends. So although you want to achieve this idea of interaction, it's already there in other events. So what's so special about this 3-hour informal event?
Alright. So basically it's not a 3-hour event, it will be about 3 hours per genre, right? Maybe you can just ask me to clarify the point before you ask me the question. Alright. So the idea is that I don't think we have an event right now that explicitly calls for people to walk in, right? And even if we do have such workshops, I don't think people have an inherent sense of inhibition towards coming for it in the first place, right? So I'd really like to have an event, all the genres under one umbrella, one weekend, where we're explicitly asking people who have never danced, never done dramatics before to turn up, right? Also, how it's different from other events. I've already spoken about this, about the high levels of commitment required for most other events. Like for even in Freshiza, if you want to be part of the group dance, you need to give a commitment of at least 4-5 days at the very least, and these are minimum figures, right? So I don't believe people can walk in to Freshiza, and hence I've used the words walking mentorship in my manifesto as well.
Sure. The idea was of mentorship, which I don't think lasts over 3 hours as such. Atul, the question I have is with regard to your idea of recycling flexes. What I want you to tell us is the idea of putting across flexes which cost 50,000 and justifying me what is the need of putting up those flexes in the first place when you can put up posters which cost much lesser, which are put up in hostels which are much more accessible to people. You're telling me that I'm going to save 50,000 by recycling this? I'm asking why exactly am I spending those 50,000 in the first place?
Okay, so I think to answer your basic first question is, firstly, the 50,000 we spent, the 50,000 is taken to be the best cost for flexes. Okay. Secondly, the notices that we said, the posters which we put up in hostels, which we do in any scenario as currently, has become ineffective because the hostel notice boards to a certain regard have become ineffective due to the sheer number of posters that are being displayed currently at the moment. And thereafter, the flexes have a mass appeal in the way they are strategically placed. That's why these flexes have a much better visual there. Additionally, it's much better or a cost-saving initiative rather than doing like cloth. So that's why flexes turns out to be a cheaper option in that regard. And why reuse them and not be able to justify the entire 50,000 cost, but be able to reuse them and in events that we currently are pursuing like PAF, because they award for a more sturdier like feel to it. And additionally, reuse the flexes in like things like color illusion, which we already experimented. Expanding that idea is a really recycling.
The next question is to general championships. General championships with regard to gem of the GC. So I have two questions. Is this going to extend to all GCs firstly? Secondly, how are you going to recognize who exactly is the gem in that particular team, in the set of teams when you're talking about a literary arts event or something like that? For example, if it's dramatics, I can understand the best artist or the best guitarist could be given the gem of the GC. However, when you're talking about giving the gem of the GC to, let's say, the team which came second or the team which came third, what exactly is going to be the number of points that you're going to provide to this particular person? It's going to depend on which position did his team come into. So how are you going to normalize that factor?
Yeah, so answer to the first question is, yes, group GCs में होगा. Answer to the second question is, हमने बोला कि dramatic GC का कुछ सही आया है. So we'll be looking at the X factor. अगर कोई gem, see, broad can be a gem, the light can be a gem, and an actor can be a gem, script can be a gem. So it is the best part in any of the event.
I'm sorry.
I think the question is fairly different.
Yeah, the question is slightly different. So what we're trying to say is, the fact that you are a gem was already rewarded by the fact that you have a position
And
in
I'm doubly rewarding that person.
And now I'm going to reward you extra. So don't you see that this is an unfair practice?
Yeah, so जैसे कोई टीम अगर हारती है, तो अगर उसमें एक बंदे ने इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे बहुत अच्छा परफॉर्म किया है.
What's the probability of this?
Yeah, so probability, I'll give an example. For example, for host number 5. Sorry, I won't give the example. I won't take the name. Sorry.
All right. So you got the question right?
Right.
So suppose in a losing cause, if someone has actually done a very good job and he is the gem of the GC, will you actually award him more points as compared to a hostel which has secured the first position Anyway, they're getting 100 points. Now will the best actor add another 30 points?
No, see the thing is, points हम लोग जो decide करेंगे वो कॉम में होगा. It will be 5% or 10% of that with GC. And secondly,
Means they are keeping it constant, whether he is getting the first position or the 10th position.
it's
It's
constant.
a constant.
Also constant.
First question was, what according to you is the role of the Institute Cultural Council in providing infrastructure to those students who want to go professional in the cultural sphere?
Alright. I think it's very important to have a certain level of quality in cult, right? Because when you're a freshman and you enter the institute, what appeals to you to do cult in the first place? You see these really awesome productions which make you and inspire you to put blood and sweat together to be part of this institute's cultural activities, not because you necessarily will do so well in the future, but the possibility that you can choose to do well in the future, right? So I think to inspire people at the grassroots level, it's very important to have some quality right on the top, right? And to ensure this quality right on the top, there's a minimum infrastructure that's absolutely required, and I think the General Secretary should definitely provide it, right? I think there's a very fine line between going professional and to ensure certain minimum quality, doing well at inter-college tests, etc. And I think there should be a right kind of balance between the two.
The infrastructure, basically making the infrastructure available happen in three fronts. A is the basic equipment when it comes to, now to a certain extent, since you've taken that level and basically want to expand it to that level, I agree the Institute Cultural Council might not be able to facilitate you in that basic process of when it comes to purely equipment. But to be able to expand the Institute Cultural Network to provide you that kind of exposure and provide you with those opportunities on a cultural front, where an academic institution you would not promote it on a holistic level, basically insists on you to pursue this cultural network. But what I'm trying to establish is a basic exposure, that basic field to basically live that passion and live that professionalism in a way in cultures. That's what I'm trying to create, and that's what I feel the institute should also try, the cultural front.
Yeah, so जैसे मैंने बताया कि हम लोग learnings provide करेंगे. So through School of Art we are providing that, and for people who want to go professionals, हम लोगों के पास already एक film group है जिसमें कि लोग properly professional level film बना के and they can use it for professional purpose.
The second question. So you have a set of secretaries in your council who have their own manifesto, who are elected by the people. Primarily what I'm trying to get to is you're not interviewing and getting them on board. So when they have their own set of vision, how will you as a general secretary channelize them in one particular direction in order to ensure that your tenure goes on smoothly?
Alright. I think people necessarily should absolutely have their own opinions, and that's the advantage of having 7 diverse people on board to provide 7 different perspectives, not only on their respective genres, right, but also what they believe that cultures in IIT should be all about. I think in most cases it is completely plausible and likely to come to a consensus through a discussion in council, but in cases where there is a standoff or no consensus can be reached, I think the decision on each particular genre should be left between the General Secretary and the Secretary of that genre who is more experienced in it.
Okay, the basic problem one GS might face when it comes to like getting 7 secretaries, like all separate minded in a way, is like the worst case scenario that you can probably imagine. But the real challenge for the GS is this, to be able to incorporate this holistic approach on the general improvement of cultures. A GS's approach in my regard should be aimed at not specifically catering to the individual genres, but a holistic growth of every genre, the culture of IT. The genres aren't the entire culture of IT. The idea of the IT culture is vast in its like wings, and be able to expand that and be able to integrate the genre-wise secretaries, the basic mindset, into his own holistic approach is what the GS faces and what he should do.
Yeah, so I agree कि मेरा भी vision होगा, बाकी secretaries का भी vision होगा. So we'll try and keep more and more meetings in the initial times ताकि हम लोगों के vision coherent हो और हम लोग try करेंगे कि सबका manifesto और सबके vision clear हो पाए at the same time. Obviously, coherency has to be there for that.
Okay. Third question was, let us consider, before that just to give a history. So the Institute Cultural nominee has in the past taken the role of an advisor at times, has been an event manager in a particular year. So let's consider a scenario where you have 2 such Institute Cultural nominees. How will you go about dividing work amongst between the two so that your efficiency is maximum?
Alright. I think with the advent of a lot of technicalities involved in bill processing, refunds and all of that. And also with the advent of a lot of bigger events happening in the institute, right? We saw a lot of flagship showcase events in the institute. We saw the campus, we saw Copenhagen. The idea being, I think I can see two distinct directions in which a person can work, right? One is the absolute basic duties, in which I would include overlooking general championships, refunds, overlooking the basic functioning of class. And the other direction, I believe, is expansion of new dimensions in cult, right? Which, given proper time and effort, can also be taken to a whole new level. So maybe I have one secretary who's looking into the more basic general stuff, and one secretary who's constantly innovating and looking into new dimensions. I'm sorry, both nominees.
Okay, so my idea is when it comes to the cultural anomalies and having a division between the two cultural anomalies, what I focus on is A, the financial part of the GS's work is one of the most time-consuming as well as one of the most efficiency requiring in jobs. To be able to ensure that that structure of it, the financial, the cultures are working very efficiently, and also in the genre-wise financials. That is going to be the role of one of my cultural anomalies. And the second anomaly, I would basically having more on the lines of an advisory, as well as more feedback of different cultural genres that he or she might represent, or he or she might have a background to. So that is one of the efficient systems I think which will enable the second cultural anomaly to function more efficiently in that regard, and this would be my separation of powers and culture.
Yeah, so मैं एक illusion on को administration का काम दूंगा क्योंकि because it takes lot of man hours of general secretary and also the administrative secretaries to get the administration work done. For second, I'll be providing the cultural classes and the work for getting to fest, intervallic festivals.
So what's the plan for the next year? Since we have Hostel 15 and 10 has already come up and 15 that is going to come up in the coming year. How will your plan of execution of cultural activities vary in any way in order to go about catering to these people of the hostels?
Alright. To the best of my knowledge, having spoken to the person concerned, I believe that only Hostel 50 will be constructed in time for next year's student inflow.
Right, so I said Hostel 15 for next year.
Which will only house PG freshmen. So I guess the whole concept of freshies can continue to be preserved, because the only issue right now is freshies right now has different hostels. So we can have PGs from the PG freshman hostel representing the PG genre as before, and freshmen from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 10 representing the hostel. So I don't see any major change in events per se, but I see the additional need to go ahead and cater to people in these hostels, especially in terms of workshops, especially in terms of orientations, help them build their cultural council and enable themselves to serve themselves better.
So as of now, as we've been informed, the Hostel 15 would basically occupied by people who are looking for a single room and for setting out PGs there. So what I see in Hostel 15's culture developing is something similar to Hostel 1. And I'll be focusing on that how we're developing Hostel 1, basically having a structure to it. We won't be able to our secretaries directly come and be initiated. So initially an adaptation of wings and adaptation of hostels by basic people, by people who are pro the institute, who are pro the cultural community, to be able to adopt a wing and be able to directly serve as a cultural mentor in that process. Not an official position but a voluntary position is I think one of the best ways to cater to Hostel 15, and further if in the future it will also accommodate UG freshmen, then it become almost mandatory to impose this time.
Right, so as already mentioned, we will be having separate PG cultural orientation. So we'll be having a separate orientation at the hostel of 15 and 16 for people who are going there, PG freshmen, and for the girls who are going there, the UG girls. As I mentioned, we will be having genre-wise committee. So through all the committee, we will be ensuring that the hostel level पे वहाँ जो कल्चर प्रमोट हो रहा है वो अच्छा से हो रहा है.
Alright. Final question. So you might be aware that in a lot of our competitions we give out prizes. What according to you is the requirement of incentivizing events held under the cultural council?
So the idea being is we've all become more resume centric. We all have so much more marginal utility for our time, right? I don't believe in providing monetary incentives for each and every event. It might have happened this year in some particular genres, but I'm not in coherence with that idea. What I'd like to believe is it's okay on an occasional exactly for this reason, I have proposed in my manifesto low-prep GCs, where I recognize that open events are only so useful to this extent in this day and age, and we really like to use GCs, low-prep GCs, as proposed in my manifesto, to bring in participation from the institute, where people with lower levels of time, work, and lower levels of commitment can participate in this, and probably are incentivized to participate in this because they might have the chance of winning the GC.
To a fair extent, what I believe the process of incentivizing does is like when there's a new event, when you're trying to promote a structure, you need to drive people to that event and make that structure more visible and more like achievable on that extent. So in such an aspect, I would be pro incentivizing. In established structures, I would not be pro cash incentivizing, but be able to reward people on a holistic basis for their contribution across different genres is something I focus on and what I do to do. So incentivizing in new formats is something I'd be pro for, and incentivizing in established structures is something not.
Yeah, so according to me,